Hello, and welcome to the 29th video in my Punishing Graven lore series. Today we'll be covering the 20th chapter of the main story, Across the Ruined Sea. Previously we left off with Karenina and the engineering force being sent to the moon to repair a crippled zero-point reactor, enabling the creation of Imperia and mass production of the Omega weapons. During the battle for the moon, Luna regained her resolve to live, and as Karenina and the others returned to Babylonia, Luna made her way back to the surface. Following that was the arrival of Noan, and the encounter with Lithos and Vonnegut. Now Greyraven and the Purifying Force joined together to investigate an abandoned aquarium, following the signal of a missing purification squad. Now without any further delay, Chapter 20, Across the Ruined Sea. After encountering Lithos and learning that a consciousness can live on within the tide, Hassan informs Commandant that these rumors don't just target constructs, but humans as well. The largest of these groups is a cult of Red Tide worshippers called Scarlet Revelation. The cult has been tracked to the abandoned Copperfield Aquarium, and Greyraven alongside the Purifying Force are tasked with the continuation of the search, as well as finding any survivors from the missing team sent to investigate. Commandant and Lucia board the transport, alongside the Purifying Force members and Bianca herself, who is using her new stigmata frame provided by Chrono, while the others are repaired following a prior battle against Vonnegut. The biggest addition to this frame is the Phantom Tracer, a machine that can simulate past events, but unlike the Spear of FOS, it can read data stored within the Punishing Virus, albeit at a risk of mind deviation if its use is not managed properly. Both the frame and Phantom Tracer were only recently completed, thanks to the information gleaned from Noan's arrival, making this its first time in active use. A team of Purifying Force constructs led by Vice Captain Chico entered the abandoned aquarium, following the trail of Scarlet Revelation, who were lured in by the promises of safety and power from the Ascendants. Of the 13 original cult leaders, only one made it to the aquarium, a woman named Grace. While conducting their search, Chico and her team fell into a trap, leading to the rescue party being sent out to follow their tracks. This is what Bianca saw after her first use of the Phantom Tracer. Soon after, she receives a call from Vesalius, Chrono's head researcher and primary developer of the Stigmata frame. She warns Bianca of Stigmata's instability due to its hasty construction and potential for mind deviation. This risk is compounded by Bianca's refusal to accept the frame's nature, as even the coating of the frame is used to hide away its true appearance, consequently also sealing its true potential. Using the Phantom Tracer, Bianca follows the shadows, reading the data left behind by those who were consumed by the tide. Stumbling on some of the cult survivors, we get the password to the water curtain blocking the rest of the facility, learning that it was sealed off by Grace's order. As the curtain rises, the viral concentration soars. The walls are drenched in a sticky black ooze, rotting piles of muscle, flesh, and metal littering the ground, the remains of the constructs once part of Chico's squad. Through the data, she bears witness to their horrific ends, when she is beckoned forward by a phantom of her own, the image of Chico calling out to her, attempting to lure her mind deeper into the abyss. After breaking free of the illusion, Bianca reports her findings back to Babylonia. At its current volume, the amount of red tide within the aquarium would contaminate the entire ocean in only 2 months if it were to ever be released. Hassan decides to appropriate the Omega weapons meant to cleanse the moon, asking Bianca to retrieve concrete evidence of the tide to convince Parliament to approve their use. Lucia stays with the Purifying Force constructs, both to protect the refugees and secure an exit in case of retreat, as Bianca and Commandant push deeper into the aquarium. The further in they go, the more Bianca's mind deviates, forcing Commandant to initiate a deep mind connection to keep her stable. On the second level of the aquarium, the two encounter a new enemy called a hetero-consciousness host, an abomination containing the consciousness data of those lost to the tide. They defeat the hetero host, but the strain of combat took its toll on the weathered structures supporting the facility. The glass separating the aquarium from the ocean cracks, flooding the entire building. The emergency doors begin lowering, trying to prevent the rest of the wings from flooding. Knowing there isn't enough time to retreat, Commandant has Lucia gather the refugees and constructs, telling her to evacuate now and come back for them later, when the gate suddenly stops. Grace speaks out over the intercom, begging for aid, as she and the other cult members have been trapped in the control room. Since Grace controls their only means of escape, they make their way to the control room, gathering up those too weak to move, and rush back to the exit, trying to escape the impending collapse as they fight off the attacking hetero creatures. Everyone manages to make a successful retreat, except Bianca, who was swept away by the tide. She waits in the depths of her own mind, wondering when the infection will take hold of her, or maybe she was rescued by Lucia just in time. She struggles to wake up, pushing past her infection, only to find herself in the arms of a twisted creature. It runs its fingers over her lips, the virus on its hands singeing her skin, painting a bright red smile across her face. She chokes back tears, trembling at the sight of the creature standing over her. No matter how mangled or deformed, Bianca would always recognize her second in command, her vice captain, Chico. After receiving Commandant's report on the battle, Hassan and Nicola enlist the help of General Wells, another high-ranking military leader, in hopes of convincing Parliament to deploy all available Omega weapons to the surface. However, Parliament wants to keep a portion in reserve, an insurance policy to make sure the moon is virus-free, as it's the only place where Omega weapons can be constructed, and it has only been partially secured. Still, the two refuse to give up here, since it's up to them to give the ground forces the best fighting chance possible. On the surface, Commandant is stuck doing nothing after the evacuation, having been hit with a standby order. The Aquarium has crumbled away, releasing the gathered tide into the ocean. Now utterly powerless, they sit by the coast, watching as humanity's home is threatened once more. After updating Commandant on the meeting progress, Celica rushes through the halls, running into Murray of all people, who silently hands her a data chip before taking his leave. In it was the data pertaining to the creature stirring under the waves, and the havoc it could bring if left unchecked. But not even this was enough to convince the council members to deploy the Omega weapons. Hearing that Parliament still refuses to support the operation, Commandant and the remaining constructs come up with a plan of their own. While the council members spend their time arguing, a recorded message appears on the holoscreen. Commandant, along with the remaining surface forces, have decided not to retreat, choosing to defend the coast from the impending calamity. The Parliament wants to allow the tide to rage and pick up the pieces after the Omega weapons are completed. While water can be purified and buildings reconstructed, the humans who would perish are irreplaceable. The faith they have in Babylonia is unwavering, and most important of all, it would tarnish mankind's pride. How could they possibly face the younger generations knowing they gave up on the surface to hide away in space? In this moment, regardless of the Parliament's choice, those on the ground have made their own decision, standing firm against the storm for the sake of all those who can't. For the victory of mankind, to reclaim the Earth, we have made this choice. A declaration signed by each and every individual on the battlefield. The message ends, and in its place is a status report from the Lunar Survey Team, having successfully investigated 90% of the moon's surface, a number that should have been utterly impossible at their original pace. But seeing those on the ground willing to risk their lives, the engineers couldn't allow themselves to fall behind. Their survey vehicles were slow, heavy, and needed paved roads, slowing progress immensely, so they ditched them. choosing to send every member on foot to speed things up. While not under threat from corruption, the moon still suffers from unstable terrain and rogue gravity wells, and those land rovers were meant to offer protection, so their decision to abandon them was nearly incomprehensible. The room is left in utter silence until Nicola calls out the dedication of their soldiers, highlighting how far they will go to tip the scales in humanity's favor. He pounds his fist on the podium, asking how those in attendance could witness such a display of loyalty and not mirror their dedication. So one last time, he calls for a vote. Beneath the sea, Bianca sinks into the depths, surrounded by the bodies of the fallen, waiting to be dissolved by the tide. She thinks to herself, would ending it here be better than becoming just another projection? Images flash through her mind as data from the punishing virus forces its way in. Those in the purifying force are fundamentally different from those in the task force. Their job is to execute those who have gone corrupted, former allies. In a job where anyone can be corrupted at any time, what use is there in forming bonds or building attachments? This led to their members, willing or not, to turn cold and merciless, slaying comrades without hesitation. Despite their disdain for Bianca's methods, and no matter how much they mocked her, she always believed she could inspire a change. An infinite stream of data forces its way into her mind, thousands of voices that don't belong blending together. It calls out to her, as a friend, as Chico, or perhaps as someone who was once Chico. She refuses to believe the hollow words of a projection, but in truth Chico has been here all along, protecting her, absorbing the virus that should have corrupted her. From below, another voice calls out to her, and the Phantom Tracer activates, gathering, decrypting, and uploading data, sights she's never seen, lifetimes she's never lived, hopes and prayers answered by a false wish granter. This unknown tells her to leave the tide be, that to destroy it would be to wipe out all those who continue to live in bliss within it, that she too could live happily inside the tide like the others, that it could fix her every imperfection. But without those imperfections, who would she be? A sister who killed her own father in cold blood, a witch who brought nothing but death to all those around her, or a hesitant captain, one whose restraint is seen as weakness. Whether people call her a murderer, fence-sitter, or witch, all sides make her whole, and every aspect has shaped her into who she is. Having found her answer, Chico calls out to her friend, asking her to keep the promise they made in that snowfield so long ago, that if she were to ever fall to corruption, Bianca would be the one to kill her. Over the next few days, those on the coast defend against the hetero creatures, with days of continuous fighting and lack of supplies taking its toll, but their fight is nowhere near over. From the sea, a massive creature emerges, bringing with it a new surge of tide. Commandant calls out for reinforcements and is greeted by Vera, who tells him the Omega weapons have been deployed throughout the ocean, but those on land will need to be set up manually, when the 4 members of Strikehawk join the fray, defending the coastline and deploying the remaining Omega weapons. On Babylonia, Lee and Liv make their way to Nicola's office, ready to submit their request to join the ground fighting, entering the room only to find Karenina and Teddy have beaten them to the punch. The 4 constructs convince Nicola to make a move, trying to find the best way through the blockade. Lee searches the map, and suddenly spots a set of coordinates the hetero creatures have yet to barricade. He suggests sending 2 groups, one to deliver the Omega weapons, and the other to elicit the help of those on the surface. Enlisting the aid of Rosetta, Dark Ares, Harley Joe, and Yatta, they put together enough teams to enact Lee's plan. On the ground, the weather is not on humanity's side. It churns the ocean, sending waves of hetero creatures past the defensive lines. The temporary command center is breached when a familiar voice shouts at Commandant to get down, and a rain of bullets signals the arrival of aid. Not long after, Karenina and Teddy show up with the rest of the Omega weapons, replenishing those that have been worn down. Kamu calls in, requesting help as those on the sea have nearly been destroyed, when Rosetta shows up, bringing with her all the naval power the ARU could spare. But still, it's not enough. The number of hetero creatures hasn't dropped, instead they've increased in both number and ferocity. The storm also refuses to cooperate, slowing down the transport of Omega weapons, as their vehicles can't drive in the muddy sand. No matter what they do, the situation will not get better if they can't fix their most critical issue. They simply don't have enough people. Shortly after the refugees escaped the Aquarium, Dark Ares arrived at their camp. Lee knew Watanabe would show up to help the survivors, and he sent no one to get their help for the impending disaster. As a former member of the Purifying Force, Palma despises anything related to corrupted or the Tide, and the thought of rendering aid to those who actively worship the Tide sickens her. But those in the cult didn't worship the Tide out of devotion. They were scared and angry people, simply searching for a way to survive. Unable to even become constructs, they lost themselves to despair and false promises. Now with the very fate of the world at stake, Grace and many others are more than willing to sacrifice everything to fight back, since hesitation here would mean the deaths of everyone, including themselves. After the latest hetero creature assault, the lines have once again settled into a stalemate. Both every passing moment, the encroaching tide whittles away at the defenses. Commandant prepares to pull back the eastern front, choosing to spare his forces and counterattack later. Suddenly, Harley Joe speaks out over the comms, informing them of Dark Ares' arrival, bringing with them Watanabe and the Forsaken. But that's not all. No one looks at the horizon behind him, a smile creeping on his face, as Grace leads her members through the valley, all prepared to help in defense of the coastline. In the shadow of the battle, a figure appears on a nearby beach. Bambinata carries the long-missing Vanessa to safety, having been saved by Teasel. He returned to do this one last kindness, and even admits that there has been a genuine change within Vanessa. But in his absence, he has made his choice to abandon Babylonia, and if they were to ever meet again, it would be as enemies. While she understands that it is far too late, she makes one last request of her former teammate. She takes out a camera, and there in the midst of the storm, Egret shares its first and last team photo. With a steeled heart, Bianca bids Chico farewell, waking up in a corner of the aquarium, surrounded by red tide. She holds up the Phantom Tracer and sees the image of Cinderelic, alongside Lithos, Grace, and the remains of the female twin. After its battle with Liv, the twin survived by a thread, but any semblance of consciousness was long gone, even after its body had been restored. If successful, this experiment would provide a more complete resurrection to those who are lost, including Cinderelic's mother. Lithos tells Grace that her answer lies here, that after merging with the twins' remains, she will no longer have to fear the virus, or anything else in the world. She takes a step forward, and the door is thrust open, as dozens of Purifying Force constructs enter the room. Chico vows to put an end to the vile experiment, and her choice of words fills Lithos with indescribable rage. He stands from his chair, the ground surging beneath his feet, and the fighting begins. It doesn't last long, and in the end the constructs are devoured by the tide, with Chico herself being fused with the twins' remains, becoming what she is now. Bianca now realizes this is where Chico was lost, and became the reborn hetero-human who saved her life. The corruption washes away the temporary coating, revealing the true face of the witch underneath. She closes her eyes, recalling all of the memories Chico passed on to her, and fights her way to the outside world. Deep in space on the DeLorean Discovery, Nanami reminisces about the possible future she once saw long ago, how a witch sank to the bottom of the ocean, or the young man staring down at Earth as pillars of red light shoot up from the surface. The hologram of a woman with white hair snaps the girl out of her memories. In this world, Chico took over after Bianca was injured and headed to the bottom of the sea in her stead. What happened to alter the future? What changed the disaster that took place in the simulations? Seeing the image of a small lamp in the document, she figures it out, telling Hikma to prepare the needed files for a fourth-dimensional data transfer. With the Phantom Tracer, Chico's presence, and the high concentration of virus, she finds a way to give humanity a fragment of the key needed to pass their next trial. As morale fades due to the relentless fighting, someone spots a figure in the distance. Rising from the sea, water boiling with every step, is the missing captain of the Purifying Force. She raises her sword to the sky, renewing the confidence of all those on the coast. Instead of trying to save energy defending, they give it everything they have, pushing forward to wipe out the horde, eliminating every corrupted that steps upon the beach. Watching as the tide is held off, Lithos decides to make his move, speeding across the water to exploit a weakness in their defenses. But it was all part of the plan. Bianca sat by knowing that the culprit would reveal themselves if a flaw appeared, and she couldn't have been more right.
光を与えましょう。
After defeating Lithos, a number of hetero creatures arrive to take his body away before Bianca can act, but with bigger concerns, she makes her way back to shore. She explains that the creature is fused with Chico's mind, and whether intentional or not, it has been devouring the surrounding virus and hetero creatures, as if she's still alive fighting within it. Now all that's left is to have Bianca head out and give it one last push, to finally put Chico to rest. In the end, the wind carries away Chico's final words, her farewell to her captain and friend, as a core fragment is absorbed by the Phantom Tracer. After the fighting comes cleanup. Liv helps treat the wounded, as Lucia, Lee, and the others search for survivors, take note of damaged equipment, and destroy the straggling hetero creatures. Commandant heads to the end of the pier, taking a seat next to Bianca, as the two look out across the ruined sea. Not only did she find Chico, in the end she found herself, discovering the courage to hold her head high, with a look of determination he's never seen on her before. As the transports arrive, the two prepare to leave, with Bianca turning around to where the hetero-human was destroyed, offering a silent oath to her fallen friend. Having made it back to Babylonia, Bianca changes back into her Veritas frame, now no longer carrying with it a risk of mind deviation. As for the core fragment she brought back, as far as Asimov can tell, it's some sort of message, but with an encryption beyond even his current abilities. However, he did manage to decipher a single line. This is the gift of the future. While they won their fight with even less than the predicted number of casualties, their biggest regret was not retrieving Lithos' frame. Although for what it's worth, Bianca did manage to grab his hairpin. A hairpin that is currently missing. On the other side of Babylonia, no one leaves his routine frame testing to find Rosa waiting for him. She takes out the hairpin, asking for any information he has on Lithos. Meanwhile, Vanessa sits in the Star of Life. It has been a number of months since her disappearance, and Commandant takes the time to pay her a visit. Later on, the two are joined by Simon, and then Harley. For the first time since their graduation, the four can share a moment of peace, laughing and telling stories about days past. As he leaves, he sees Bianca, with members of the Purifying Force calling after their captain. At one point, they chose to distance themselves for fear of having to point their blades at comrades, but just as Bianca promised, she brought about a change, proving that the weakness of their bonds is in fact their greatest strength. Alright, and congratulations, you have all just finished chapter 20 of the main story. Once again, can't thank you guys enough for watching these. Makes me feel good. Well, I guess just next video will be Floating Record Chapter 3, Left Unsaid. Alright, good, we got that out of the way. Yapping time, because this chapter was quite packed. So starting off, we got introduced to Vesalius, who is Korono's Asimov, essentially, and the big boss lady that Yarho's so scared of in chapter 19. We got reacquainted with Vanessa. She finally showed back up. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I know we're supposed to be on the hate Vanessa train after what she did to Liv, but I'm gonna be real with you. That last 10 minutes of the chapter, her hard shell was coming off, and I saw the vulnerability. It was cute. I'm not gonna hold you. Thought it was cute. We have Chico, who we got introduced to at the end of chapter 19, very briefly, and who died off screen by the time chapter 20 started. So, rip Chico, she was here for a bad time, not a long time. And last big guy here, Lithos, returns after dying at the end of Cinderburns. So, with Lithos and Chico, him fusing her with the remains of the female twin, trying to, craft or make a way for those who are in the tide to resurrect themselves out of the tide. I feel like this really highlights the evolution arms race that's kind of happening in this second act of the story. I definitely stole that term from somewhere. But you can see it in all the past chapters from 16, 17 onward. They've put much less of a focus on, virus infect robot kill human. And it's more like the virus itself is coming alive and it's creating life on its own and it's evolving. And the byproduct of that evolution is that humanity has to die because, humanity and the virus are just too incompatible for each other. Period. They can't exist together. So for one to evolve, the other just has to die. Right? They're not they are inherently malicious, but not, I don't feel like it's in the way you think it is, because they're animals, right? Kind of. They're creatures, right? Hetero creatures and stuff. Even with the twins, like Vonnegut said, the twins were a mirror that just reflect what humanity does to them, right? They're not inherently malicious, but you gotta remember, they were newborns in chapter 16, literally just fresh out. And what's the first thing they see is they see some random people trying to kill their mother. So naturally they fight back, right? And then what happens afterwards? They hit their mom with the hammer of dawn. So of course they're gonna feel some type of way about that. But even after they left the forest and they were just walking around, Vonnegut said they are a mirror. They will reflect whatever humanity shows them. Humanity responded with aggression, so they responded back with aggression. Because they don't understand that fundamentally they can't coexist. So now it's just a fight between, who can evolve, who can reach that next stage faster. Is it the virus creatures or is it humanity? And I really like that for the story moving forward past the, just robot bad. I think that's really cool. One other thing we got is we got to see what mind deviation actually looks like, which I want to highlight the difference between mind deviation and being corrupted, right? Mind deviation is when something with human consciousness, like a construct, is deviating, in the name, deviates from what a normal human would think. And I think it's cool that we actually got to see that. One of Chico's members got corrupted, and we see him put into kind of this mental dream landscape where he sees himself enjoying a vacation with his friend. And he decides, oh, I'm going to eat a cookie, right? He eats the cookie, and then we flash back to reality, and the cookie is his friend. He's eating his friend, right? So it's kind of a disassociation between the mind of the individual and reality going on around them. So I guess kind of like schizophrenia, but like 1,000 times worse. So that was really cool to see. And then the big emotional conflict of the chapter would be like Bianca overcoming, you know, the feelings that the other Purifying Force members have for her, and her own struggle, her own internal struggle with being that quote-unquote witch, where if you don't read her interlude, that'll kind of seem like it comes out of nowhere. I hope I did good enough trying to explain that. I tried to drop like a couple lines here and there, show some scenes from the interlude. So hopefully that didn't make it seem like that witch angle came out of nowhere, because that was a big chunk of the interlude that she was dealing with. What else? Oh, okay, this is long. Yeah, I got a lot to say, because this is a really loaded chapter, but I'm gonna end this here. It's getting a bit too long. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next video, where we cover Floating Record Chapter 3, Left Unsaid.